One girl's true story. Seeking the King. I still remember the day I walked down the aisle searching for more of the King. Just a tiny girl with an innocence of faith, reaching out for the Trinity. I loved him, the King. He came to me and let me know that he was good. I'd speak with him on my bike while riding up and down my street dodging pine cones. I loved to sing to him while skating from one end of the driveway to the other. He was always with me, and one day on that same street I told someone about him, and she believed too. I was just a girl full of joy that came from knowing my King. The enemy's pursuit. In time, worldly influences encircled, waiting to be believed and received. Over my shoulder I heard, "Look put together now." It was whispered into my bones without a word being said. The ways of this earth eroded my childlike faith, and my eyes turned away little by little. Eventually, my gaze traveled from the light of the King's face towards mortal men who looked to be so good. I pondered, how they must please the King, and longed to join their troop. I was fitted for a uniform and worked for their approval. But it was only a striving copy of the original design. At times, I failed to meet the standard and felt to hide my deficit. Great misconceptions crept in and dug a pit in my mind. No matter how I worked to attain an appearance of goodness, I could only move so far away from the lies which had become my truth. Stand up straight, get in line, and march like the rest of us. The voices became louder than the sound of the heart of my King. Confusing his desire, I fell into the ranks of marching soldiers. How he must have grieved over my fallacy. Pride's payoff. Years of marching for a false cause made me grow weary. I had even pulled my children along until one finally stopped and refused to continue. At that time, I didn't have an answer of my own, and I had to let him go, but not without a fight. Marching for the sake of being a soldier didn't prove to be a good argument. In time, I had to let them all go and decide for themselves, to march or to dance. The day came when it was hard to recall the King. Without sight of him, I lost my way. So I left the ranks, chose my own direction, and met up with others doing the same. Laughing and making up a good time, we fooled. You're okay, and so am I. Yet I'd known a truth that told me otherwise. Inevitably, without the King's light, the way became dark and we turned on one another, each out for his own good. Sounds of swords and shouting filled the street and the gang went down. While lying among the injured, I rocked and hummed a hollow tune of hopelessness. I longed to remember my song to the King, but in the distance I heard the sound of the marching boots. Realizing my shame, with bloodied hands, I bandaged my pain and returned to the marching line. Many soldiers tried not to look, reminded of hidden scrapes on their own knees. Too busy advancing, we never spoke of my fall. No one noticed the stains on my cheeks. None dared to look too closely at my injuries or their own. because soldiers never admit the depth of their scars. His presence, my undeserved reward. Limping along, I walked with a real, living man, not the soldier kind, who was nearing the end of his race. He was dear, and his ways had reminded me of the king, fervent and unrelenting. When his body was laid down, I suffered a great loss and had to sit down and rest. Grieving under a tree, the king, dressed as a servant, came to me with cloth and salve. He knelt beside me, looked into my face, and washed the dirt, the blood, the shame. I had tried hard to be good, and all it did was lead me away from him. I showed him underneath my bandages, and he was not ashamed. He was not shocked. He'd been following me all along. He gazed at me with no judgment, only love and truth. And all I wanted to do then was tear off every bandage I'd been wearing my whole life. As he helped to unwrap them one by one, his eyes shined on me and it burned. He could see through every lie I'd ever lived, and still it didn't change his wholehearted love for me. As I rested in the warmth of his acceptance, he began to unravel every falsehood from the truth. Each moment had purpose, and not a minute was wasted. I took no thought of the march. It felt so good to just rest in his presence. I studied him closely and saw the depth of his love for me. I touched his wrist and repented of my exodus. My guilt, covered with his own blood, was washed as he cleansed my wounds. He reached down and picked me up and carried me in his arms for a while. I laid my head on his chest, and his whispers brought healing to the roots of my shame. As he set me beside him, he reminded me of my name and said, "Get back to being the girl who rode on her bike." That's when I began to see. The end's fresh start. The king was here beside me, the one I used to sing to, and my old song started to rise from deep within. It joined the songs of my life and danced around his head, causing us much merriment. No more hiding, he told me, and no more marching. Then he pointed out a new way for me to go, and I set off in that direction, carrying the truth of the beauty of my healing wounds close to me. They had revealed my need for him. He showed me others with bared scars, beautiful and free, and told us to walk together for a while. I felt his approval warming my back, and I knew he was only a breath away. Every now and again, I recall the marching boots I left behind, and I have to remind myself that I was never meant to be a soldier. So I walk and I sing, I dance and I praise, and I really live.